Oh, those dreaded sexual dysfunctions. We do not know how many people have a sexual dysfunction because they are very reluctant to admit. However, I'm probably pretty safe to say that if you get out of this life without one, you'll be pretty lucky because it is quite common to have an occasional sexual dysfunction. Again, if I don't speak over a slide, it's because I don't want to use my time. So I only have 15 minutes, and then I know you can read these for yourself. The one thing I do want to point out on this slide is, though, that only 8% of women, according to the NHSLS, aged 18 to 24 have never had an orgasm, but only 2% of women aged 40 to 59. So this tells me that the older you are, the more experienced, or the longer you've been able to get it figured out. How much interest is normal? Is it a problem if you only want to have sex once a month? Actually, I should say, is it a problem if both couples only want to have sex once a month? Of course not. It becomes a problem when one wants to have it once a day and the other only wants to have it once a month. We also need to know that to have an occasional failure for sexual dysfunction is normal. There are physical problems. And there are psychological problems. Which do you think is more of a concern, physical or psychological? You guessed it, psychological. It took us 2 slides to cover that. They are harder to determine. It's harder for somebody to admit a psychological problem. It's harder to get help for psychological problems. It's easier to get help for a physical problem. Situational means on Friday night you can't get an erection, but on Wednesday night you could, or with your lover you can get an erection, but not with your spouse. The last one, 19% of women who reported having trouble with vaginal lubrication. This does not mean that they have a lack of interest. It could just be they're not producing enough estrogen. But this is an easy problem to solve with a little water-based lubricant. Sexual desire disorders. This does not mean that they cannot get an erection or have enough lubrication or have an orgasm. This just means they don't have the desire. How much you think you have sex and how much you actually have sex are 2 different things. If a person doesn't think they're getting very much sex, it's going to have been a long time. But if they think they're getting a lot, it would have been just last night, whether that was the case or not. Some gender differences. The one I want to point out, men are more likely to have another sexual dysfunction before desire. That would mean they can't get an erection. That would cause them to not have desire. And then that would cause them to have fear of not being able to perform. And then for women, it's more often about the relationship. For women, most women, they have to feel good about the relationship before they feel good about their sexuality. On this slide, the rigid religious backgrounds often will cause one to feel guilt. For example, if you were brought up in a church that said, oh, it's a sin to have sex before marriage, and that was ingrained in you, and you were having sex before marriage, then the guilt could cause you to not fully function. Performance anxiety, impotence, erectile dysfunction. If you're a male and cannot get an erection, do you think you can will an erection? In other words, make you have one? I'm afraid not. In this case, the harder you try, the harder it probably is not going to become. And if you're a male and this has happened to you, how would you want your partner to react? Would you want you to laugh at them? Laugh at you? No, of course not. We don't want them to make a big deal of it. This would only increase the anxiety. So you might want them to show some empathy. You might want them to try to equate it to why. Maybe you've been working extra hard. Maybe you're very tired. So if they can figure out why, then maybe you can help solve the problem together. Often too much alcohol can cause a man not be able to have an erection. So that would be an easy one to figure out. On this slide, it's important that we understand that most men will experience some erectile difficulties during their lifetime for lots of different reasons. And it's okay for a man not to be in the mood. We've talked about vaginismus quite a bit throughout the semester. For different orgasmic disorders, a male orgasm disorder, delayed ejaculation, I love retarded ejaculation, ejaculatory incompetence. If sex goes on too long, it can be frustrating to both the male and the female. And female orgasm disorder is the most common disorder among women. And the most common disorder among men is premature ejaculation. And of course, this is going to depend on a man's age, on the newness of partner, how long it's been since they've had sex. All of these factors will come into play. You do know if I'm clicking through these too fast, you can stop and take more time to read them. Here's a good reason for a male not to smoke. Male smokers often have 50% more chance of having problems getting an erection. And then antidepressants and blood pressure medication can affect sexuality in males. Different forms of sex therapy. The easiest, sometimes we just have to change our self-defeating beliefs and teach ourselves some skills. I hope this class has increased your knowledge, helped you improve communication, and definitely reduce performance anxiety. Nobody wants to be pressured to be able to perform. Different medical treatments that you can use. Here it shows the Viagra and the cyclic GMP that can be helpful. Here's a picture of one of the rods that would be surgically implanted into a male. This shows it coming through the scrotum, and it doesn't do that. It just shows that's where it would go. This man basically has a mild erection all the time. It wouldn't be so stiff that it would stick out, but it's ready to go anytime. And then here's a pumping device that's surgically implanted. The reservoir's in the abdomen. The pump actually is in the scrotum next to one of the testes. And then the cylinders that become filled with the fluid in the reservoir, when you pump it up, are in the cavernosus bodies. And so he basically pumps himself up, and then when they're done, they push a release valve, and it causes the water to go back into the reservoir, and the penis will go flaccid again. I had a student whose grandfather had one of these, and he said his grandfather loved it. And then, of course, there's therapeutic treatments. You could go to couples therapy. If you went to a Masters and Johnson's clinic, let's say in Chicago, you may go and they would do all kinds of studies on each of the partners, physical, psychological. Then you would do individual counseling, couples counseling, and what they might do is say, okay, go home tonight, go out to dinner, but no touching. Go back tomorrow, get more counseling. They say, okay, only upper body touching. Go to a movie, come home, only upper body touching. Come back tomorrow. Full body touching, no sex. What are we doing here? Now we're teasing. We're also giving you permission not to have it, so it takes the pressure away and builds desire. So hopefully these activities can help. Surrogates, there's some ethical concerns with this. If it's a couple's problem, they probably need to work through it together. The next slide really explains this better. Most people just need permission. It's okay to relax. You're married now. Relax and enjoy this. Some of you may just need limited information, some specific suggestions. Very few are going to need the intensive therapy, the week-long Masters and Johnson therapy sessions that cost thousands of dollars. Self-help approaches. The graduated steps, that's kind of what I was explaining. Light genital stimulation, sometimes hand-on-hand touching, so you can teach each other how you like to be touched. A sensate focus, that would be like turn taking. So let's use the example of you want your back rubbed. So you say, I'll rub your back if you rub mine. Well, when you're getting your back rubbed, you're thinking, oh, I've got to rub theirs back. So why not tonight is your night? It's your night to have your back rubbed. You can relax, enjoy it, fall asleep if you want. You do not have to repay the favor. Then tomorrow night it'll be the other person's turn to have their back rubbed. On this slide, we've talked quite a bit about vaginismus. Basically, there are plastic vaginal dilators in graduated sizes that are helpful for this kind of treatment. For premature ejaculation for you males, there's the stop-start technique, basically, and I love how it's developed by James Siemens. What a perfect name for this technique. But basically, a man has to get mental and physical control if he's going to ejaculate too soon, and he wants to not do that. He wants to continue the intercourse episode, so you just have to stop, get control again, and then you can continue. The Masters and Johnson developed the squeeze technique and even the basilar squeeze. So this is how the squeeze technique would work, where you have to pull the whole penis out and put pressure around the corona and glands. Or you can use the basilar squeeze and put pressure around the base. That way you would not have to pull the whole penis out. For women, if they have reduced performance anxiety, then most likely eventually they will be able to have an orgasm. And of course there's ethical issues, and so there's groups that have been established to help with that. Okay, this concludes our last chapter, the chapter that kind of ties all this together and helps us understand about sexual dysfunctions. Thank you.